to the sedatives they had given him to prepare him for the surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anaesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier holding that wrist as well. It took only a little more anaesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had triple the normal level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in his struggle not to be subdued. Most of them were from the force of his own muscles had exerted on them. The second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval. He shook his head yes when someone suggested, reluctantly, they try the surgery without anaesthetic, and did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically impossible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so that the patient could write his message. It was simple: keep cutting. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anaesthetic as well, although they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralysed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given: I must remain awake. All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed back into the chamber awaiting determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for failing the stated goals of their procedure, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, an ex-KGB, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back on the gas. It was obvious that at this point, all 3 were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining against his leather bonds with all his might. First left, then right, then left again for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired for EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brain waves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flat lines as one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then returned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to the bed as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. "I won't be locked in here with these things," Not with you, he screamed at the man strapped to the table. What are you? He demanded. I must know. The subject smiled. Have you forgotten so easily? The subject asked. We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread. The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out. So nearly free. Thank you all for listening. A link to the original is in the description. Now we come to the analysis part of this reading. As I'm sure many of you are aware, this is a classic creepypasta, a very well-known one, and for good reason. It's very chilling and scary with a lot of gory imagery. It's not the best written, however, it is good enough. Just a few stumbles here and there, typos. I noticed a few places where the sentences got a bit wordy, so they could have shortened those perhaps, made them a bit more concise, but overall, a good read. So based on the context of this, stuff kinda like this did happen in Russia. This seems to be roughly mid-20th century. Back then, they did indeed do these bizarre experiments, and the value of human life was quite low. They would just put people in there who were inmates and do whatever they wanted to them just to see what happened. So realism-wise, it is quite terrifying, okay? Especially at first. Towards the end, it gets a bit cinematic. I think this would have benefited from just being portrayed as a report more than a story. At the end we have this dramatic scene where one of the researchers shoots everyone, and it's quite Hollywood. And it leads to the cool little speech at the end, but I do think a bit more realism could have taken this to the next level. So what is this about? Well, obviously the drug stops them sleeping, and the idea that is revealed at the end is that the reason humans sleep and we paralyze ourselves, which we do to stop sleepwalking, is actually to hold back some kind of inner monster that lives within all of us. I mean, these were ordinary people, and deprived of sleep using this gas, they became addicted to it. They became addicted to pain, feeding on their own bodies, just horrific monsters with incredible strength and resilience. And of course, paired with this image, it's a pretty terrifying experience. However, I do believe this image is of a Halloween prop. So I'm going to give this one a solid 4 out of 5. Could have gone up to 4.5 if it had that element of realism. But overall, pretty good. I can see why it's so popular. Remember to give your rating. I'll leave a poll, like the video if you did, share it with a friend, and of course, if you haven't already, subscribe.